So we want to begin our discussion on William Shakespeare Othello by looking at the background issues in Renaissance drama, of which Othello is a part. Remember that Shakespeare was a great Renaissance writer. Another name for the era is Elizabethan period, especially the part where Queen Elizabeth I was queen. Renaissance is a word that means rebirth. Renaissance means rebirth. Excuse me, the term Renaissance means rebirth. And it means rebirth in classical learning. The idea of rebirth is that there was a rupture, there was a break. There was a rupture, there was a break in the Enlightenment that came with classical culture. During the breakup of the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire was divided into two: the East, the Western Empire. So the medieval period is considered as a dark age. Another name for the medieval period is the Dark Ages. And why is it so? It is so called because the intellectualism, the humanism that we experienced in the classical period was ruptured in the medieval period. So this is like a philosophical darkness, not a literal darkness, like a metaphorical darkness. So with the Renaissance, you have the rebirth of classical learning. So Renaissance means rebirth, all right? And by that rebirth, we mean rebirth in classical learning. The classical learning was stopped because of the intervention of the medieval period, during which you had little or no enlightenment from the classical period. The medieval period was dominated by religion. The medieval period was dominated by religion or religious practices, with little or no humanism as intellectual activities in the form of literature, science, and philosophy. If these existed in any way, it was for religious purposes. If drama, literature, philosophy existed in the medieval period, it was to enhance religious activities, because one key trait, one key feature of the medieval period is what? The dominance of religion. So literature, everything about people in the medieval period was all about religion. Religion guided, directed the lives of people with little or no science or humanism, as we would want to call it, because of the breakup in the Roman Empire, which carried the touch of classical enlightenment. So that's what we mean by medieval period. A period where we did not have classical influences anymore, classical contribution anymore in human affairs, but was dominated by religion. So the rebirth in the 1500, all right? The rebirth in the 1500 that we're talking about in the Renaissance is the rebirth in classical learning that was stopped during the medieval period. That's what you need to understand. Okay? So, during the Renaissance, especially in England or in Europe generally, interest in classical learning was revived. Interest in classical learning was revived. People went back to study the ancients. We went back to study the ancients. People like Homer were studied. Virgil, Horace, all these classical writers were studied because there was a reawakening of interest. That's why we call the Renaissance as what? Rebirth. And when we say rebirth, what are rebirth? Rebirth in classical learning. So in the medieval period, the type of plays that were dominant, we already discussed that when we were talking about types of drama, were the mystery plays, the morality plays, and the miracle plays. Okay? So Renaissance drama began where medieval drama stopped, especially morality play. A good example of morality play, which was practiced in the medieval period up to the early period of the Renaissance, because the Renaissance began around 1500. That is the 16th century. 1500 is the 16th century. All right? So you have the medieval period from like 13 or even 1400. All right, to the end of 1400. This will be the medieval period. So the Renaissance begins from the 1500, that's the 16th century. So you take note of that. So a good example of morality play is Every Man. Every Man. You might want to check the play out. A good example of morality play is Every Man. It is an anonymous play that makes use of allegorical characters. A good example of morality play is Every Man. It is a morality play that makes use of allegorical characters. allegorical characters. Remember that plays in the medieval period tended to enhance religious purposes, and morality play aims to teach man how to make heaven. How to make heaven. Every man teaches the audience, the readers, what it takes to have salvation, so that when one dies, one can go to heaven. Because, the title "Every Man" refers to all of humanity. The title "Every Man" refers to all of humanity. It is you, it is you, it is you, it is you, and it is I. Every man. The play is anonymous, just like most medieval plays. Why is it anonymous? It's anonymous because we do not know the author. Okay? So when we say the play is by anonymous, that means we don't know who wrote it. So may I ask you, which of these is an anonymous play? So one that has no authorship, or the authorship is unknown. An anonymous play or anonymous work of art is one that we do not know the author. And we have works like that. And Every Man is one of them. Okay? The characterization of Every Man is allegorical. Okay? For instance, every man is summoned by death. God sends death to summon every man because God is unhappy with how worldly the world has become. People have become too worldly, too materialistic, lacking in morality. And so God sends death to go and call every man. Remember, every man is you, and you. Right? And when death calls, what does that mean? It means the end of life. And so every man suddenly comes to face with death. But he's unprepared to meet his God. All right? So he asked a number of people, a number of persons to go with him, like fellowship, like friends, okay? Without success. Even material wealth cannot go with him. Meaning that when you're about to die, even some of your friends will not be able to go with you. You are all alone at the moment of death. The only thing that will help you will be your good deeds. Okay? Good deeds. In the end, it is only good deeds that helps every man on his journey to meet God. And first of all, he needs knowledge. He needs knowledge. Knowledge teaches him to seek salvation, confess his sins. All right? Which is, every man shows us the teaching of the Catholic Church. All right? Or Christian religion. You have to confess your sins and seek salvation. And after that, that's when you are ready to meet your God. And it is only your good deeds that will accompany you on your journey to meet God as the final journey of life. All the other things, friends, worldly possessions, cannot go with you. That is what the play illustrates. So I will want you to look up the play. All right, it's a very short play and has many interpretations online. So that's an example of morality play, which was meant to teach salvation to the people in the medieval period. Now, and we are saying that morality play marked the end of Renaissance, of medieval period, and the beginning of the Renaissance drama. Okay? I also said that if we do not call it Renaissance drama, we can also call it Elizabethan drama or theater, because the age is also named after Queen Elizabeth, during whose reign most of these writers like Shakespeare lived and wrote. So note that Elizabethan plays or theater began with interludes. Elizabethan plays or theaters began with what? Interludes. Elizabethan plays began with what? Interludes. When we are talking about types of drama, we mention interludes. Okay? It has various definitions, but what you should notice that it is a play that intervenes between two major plays. It's a play that intervenes between two major plays. So, Elizabethan plays began as interludes in the household of the Archbishop of Canterbury, in the household of Archbishop of Canterbury and Chancellor of England under Henry the Seventh. Under Henry the Seventh. This is how you write Henry the Seventh. Archbishop of Canterbury and Chancellor of England. His name was John Morton. In the household of John Morton. The Archbishop of Canterbury and Chancellor of England under Henry the Seventh. It is not as if morality plays ended immediately we entered the Renaissance. Morality plays continue to be acted even after we entered the Renaissance. Morality plays continue to be acted even after we entered the Renaissance. Renaissance drama owes its sophistication to classical influences. Remember, we've said that Renaissance means rebirth in classical learning and classical literature. So Renaissance drama owes its sophistication to what? To classical influences. For instance, Elizabethan comedy was influenced by Plautus and Terence. Plautus and Terence. Plautus and Terence influenced. They were Roman comedy writers. So their works influenced Renaissance comedy. I'm trying to exemplify why we say that. Renaissance drama is influenced by classical drama. Because that is what Renaissance is all about. Renaissance is the rebirth in classical learning. Okay? So from these two writers, Plautus and Terence, Elizabethan comedy derived its intrigue plot. Intrigue plot. Intrigue plot. Intrigue plot. Plot that is meant to surprise, to have a surprising effect on the reader. A structure of acts and scenes. A structure of acts and scenes from Plautus and Terence. Elizabethan drama borrowed what? Acts and scene, intrigue plots, and type characters. And type characters. And type characters. Type characters. Type characters are like stock characters whose roles are well known. Like the role of the bad servant. Like the role of the bad servant or a cowardly soldier. Like the role of the bad servant or a cowardly soldier. Even in the Renaissance, comedy was treated as lower than tragedy. Who first of all considered tragedy to be higher than comedy? Which name do you remember that we talked about in class? Who considered tragedy to be higher than comedy? Because we are saying that even in the Renaissance, comedy is seen to be inferior to tragedy. But somebody began it in the classical period. Somebody began that idea in the classical period. Who was that? Who was that person? That person is Aristotle. Aristotle said that great writers wrote tragedy, while lesser writers wrote comedy. So the Renaissance, which borrows ideas from the classical period, still retained the idea that comedy was lower than tragedy. So in Renaissance drama, the style is that the highly placed characters speak in verse. The highly placed characters speak in verse. That is poetry. Speak in verse. That is poetry. Right? While the lower class characters speak in prose. While the lower class characters speak in prose. While the lower class characters speak in prose. Some of the subgenres of drama practiced in the Renaissance period, in the Elizabethan period. Some of the genres of drama, or you might call it subgenres, of drama practiced in the Elizabethan or the Renaissance period were romantic comedy, romantic comedy, romantic comedy, Romantic comedy. Where you have young lovers, in which you have young lovers putting themselves in laughable circumstances. Young and inexperienced lovers find themselves in hilarious, laughable, comic situation by their mistakes because they are young in love. Romantic comedy. Then you have domestic comedy. Domestic comedy. This type of comedy depicts a domestic situation. This type of comedy depicts a domestic situation. Then you have city comedy. It has London as the setting. City comedy has London as the setting. City comedy, C-I-T-Y. City comedy has London as the setting and makes use of highly placed characters and makes use of high-class characters that have high class. It is satirical in nature. Then you have humor comedy or comedy of humor. Humor comedy. Humor comedy. Most of these things, I'm repeating them for emphasis so that you won't say you were not taught. I'm repeating them for emphasis. Humor comedy. We've spoken about them before. Humor comedy or comedy of humor is associated with Ben Jonson. It's associated with who? Ben Jonson. You might be asked, which of these authors is associated with the comedy of humor? They give a list of names. So you have to read your books in between the lines and do not miss any fact. Comedy of humor is associated with Ben Jonson, especially in his play entitled Every Man in His Humor. Especially in his play entitled Every Man in His Humor. Every Man in His Humor. Especially in a play entitled Every Man in His Humor. Comedy of humor is based on character type. It's based on type character. Thought to be made up of the presence of a particular fluid in the body. If you don't call it fluid, you call it humor. Fluid or humor in the body. This fluid is responsible for the individual's temperament. Like if some individual is a sanguine, a choleric, phlegmatic, or melancholic. Okay? So that is comedy of humor. Tragicomedy was also practiced in the Renaissance or Elizabethan drama. A good example is A Measure for Measure by William Shakespeare. A good example of tragicomedy is Measure for Measure by William Shakespeare. Measure for Measure by William Shakespeare. Another example of tragicomedy is Winter's Tale. Winter's Tale. By William Shakespeare. Winter's Tale by William Shakespeare. Another source of influence in or for Elizabethan drama has to do with tragedy. We talked about the influence for Elizabethan comedy, Plautus and Terence. For Elizabethan tragedy, the influence goes to Seneca. We already talked about this. Seneca. Seneca had a model that was based on the Roman goddess Fortuna. Fortuna, who was associated with the wheels of fortune. So that the individual fortune changes as the wheel turns, depending on the position of the individual on the wheel. If you're at the top of the wheel, then everything is going well for you at the moment. But as the wheel turns, you might get to the bottom, and then you are at the worst moment in life. Okay? So that's the wheel of fortune, possessed by the goddess Fortuna. So this wheel of fortune changes the individual's circumstances. Today, the individual is rich. The next day, the person is poor. All right? So it brings low those who are high and brings high those who are low as the wheel turns. Okay? So this idea of the wheel of fortune is also popular in medieval drama, because medieval drama was regulated by religious philosophies. Other aspects of Senecan tragedy reflected in Renaissance tragedy are other aspects of Senecan drama reflected in Renaissance tragedy are violent and bloody plot. Let's take note of that. In most of Shakespeare's plays, in Shakespeare's tragedy, you see a lot of death, of killing, blood. That is an aspect of Senecan drama that has been retained in Shakespeare's play, in Renaissance drama, or in Elizabethan drama. Okay? Rhetorical speeches, contemplative speeches, meditational speeches, like Hamlet's to be or not to be. That's another aspect of Senecan tragedy that was retained in Elizabethan drama. The frequent use of ghosts. So Renaissance drama, like the one Shakespeare writes or wrote, do not have gods, hardly had gods or goddesses as characters, but they actually had ghosts. Okay? And then you also have the 5-act structure. The 5-act structure. The 5-act structure. Most of Shakespeare's plays are organized in 5 acts. Where did he get that idea from? From Seneca. Okay? So those are the influences that the Senecan tragedy had on Elizabethan tragedy. Please take note of that. I will repeat them. I repeat them. Violent or bloody plots, rhetorical speeches, use of ghosts as characters, and 5-act structure. And 5-act structure. Two lawyers, Thomas Sackville and Thomas Norton. Two lawyers, Thomas Sackville and Thomas Norton. Two lawyers, Thomas Sackville and Thomas Norton, wrote Gorboduc or Ferex and Porrex. Wrote Gorboduc or Ferex and Porrex. Wrote what? Gorboduc or Ferex and Porrex. Underline all titles of texts. Wrote Gorboduc or Ferex and Porrex. And it is this play that first made use of the Senecan model that we have just explained. Please take note of this. And it is this play, this Gorboduc, that first made use of the Senecan model that we have just explained. The authors are Thomas Sackville and Thomas Norton, and they were lawyers. They wrote Gorboduc or Ferex and Porrex. This is the first play to make use of the Senecan model that we just talked about in the Renaissance period. The play was first produced in 1561. Gorboduc was first produced in 1561. Gorboduc was first produced in 1561. It was acted before the Queen. It was acted before the Queen in a law school. Gorboduc was written in blank verse. Gorboduc was written in blank verse. Gorboduc was written in blank verse. You should take down notes. You should take down notes. That is how to participate in class. By writing what you are hearing, the points. Gorboduc was written in what? Blank verse. What is blank verse? Alright, what is blank verse? We've explained that before when we were talking about the language of Lysistrata. The language of Lysistrata. Part of the language of classical drama, which we said was poetic. Blank verse is a poetic element. It's an element of poetry and refers to a stanza or a poem. A stanza or a poem that has meter but no rhyme. That has meter but has no rhyme. It has meter but has no rhyme. Blank verse is a poem or a stanza of a poem that has meter. If it has meter, it means it has regular rhythm. It has regular rhythm, but has no rhyme. That's why it is blank. It is different from free verse, which has no meter and no rhyme. So Kabadok was written in blank verse, and this will influence the meter of other Elizabethan drama that will come after it. So this is why Shakespeare also wrote in blank verse. Shakespeare wrote mostly in blank verse. So the style of Kabadok influenced writers like William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. Christopher Marlowe. The style of Kabadok influenced Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. So Elizabethan drama followed Aristotle's formula in the Poetics. Elizabethan drama followed Aristotle's formula in the Poetics. We talked about Aristotle, and one of the major works of Aristotle that we talked about was the Poetics. So, because Elizabethan drama or Renaissance drama followed the conventions of classical drama, remember, Renaissance means rebirth in classical learning. All right? So, who are they going to follow? Aristotle and other Greek and Roman writers that we have talked about. And what is the formula? What is the convention? One is the fall of the tragic hero. One is the fall of the tragic hero, which should be because he has a tragic flaw. The tragic hero has to fall because he has a tragic flaw. For instance, in Othello, written by Shakespeare, Othello is a tragic hero. He is an admirable man, a man with admirable qualities, but he trusts too much. All right, he's naive in the persons he trusts. He easily trusts, lacks spirit of discernment, and most important of all, he is given to jealousy. He falls into the trap of jealousy because of trusting the wrong person. So he falls into the trap of jealousy, and this too is death. He has anger issues. He has temperament issues. These are all Othello's faults. Character. You trust Iago too much, without knowing that Iago, who pretends to be his friend, is actually his enemy. Okay? So the tragic hero falls owing to what? A character flaw. Owing to a character flaw. Flaw in the constitution, the moral constitution of the character. That's what leads to the fall of the tragic hero. All right? So this fall constitutes a fall from eminence to misery, from grace to disgrace, from grace to grass, from a highly placed position to a lower placed position. This fall is marked by reversal. This fall of the tragic hero is marked by reversal. Reversal, which we call peripetia. Oh, you remember the term, peripetia. Marked by reversal, which we call peripetia. Peripetia. A sudden reversal in the fortunes of the tragic hero that leads to his fall. That's peripetia. Okay? It's also marked by discoveries. Discoveries. This discovery is called anagnorisis. Anagnorisis. Something that was unknown. And while it is unknown, the tragic hero is safe and fine. But once it is revealed, tragic hero falls. That's why we say that the tragedy of the tragic hero is marked by what? Marked by what? Reversal and discoveries. Peripetia and anagnorisis. All right? Anagnorisis refers to the sudden knowledge or revelation that results in the fall of the tragic hero. All right? Sudden knowledge. For instance, when Oedipus, the king, suddenly realizes that the person that he thought was his wife, all this while was actually his mother. That leads to his destruction. That revelation is his tragedy. That's what we mean by anagnorisis, discovery. While the secret remains, the person is safe and on top. But once the revelation is made, the person is gone. That's anagnorisis. It can also be through peripetia, a sudden turn in the fortunes of the tragic hero. Please take note of these things. Another Aristotelian formula is that this tragic hero should be a highly placed person, a person of high estate, highly placed person of high estate. Okay? That means it should be better than we. All right? Should be better than we. The person should be better than we, not one of us. He's just up there. And we look up to him. All right? We all look up to him. We all admire him. And that is because when he falls, we will have to learn a lesson from the fall. Okay? Because he is raised the higher that he might fall the heavier. He is raised the higher that he might fall the heavier. So as we said in the course of this class, tragedy is a tragedy of a great man. Tragedy is the fall of a great man. Tragedy, traditional tragedy, conventional tragedy, classical tragedy, up to Renaissance tragedy is the fall of a great man. And the tragic hero in classical tragedy is a highly placed person. But you need to know that in modern tragedy, the tragedy involves a common person. In modern tragedy, the tragedy involves who? A common person, a petty trader, a fisherman, a mechanic by the roadside. Is the tragic hero in modern tragedy. But in classical tragedy, which Renaissance tragedy is a part, the fall is the fall of a great man. So you should know the difference. In modern tragedy, it is a tragedy of a common person whose circumstances have been made worse by the social situation that he finds himself in. So know the difference between the classical tragedy, the classical hero, and the modern hero. The modern hero is a common man. The traditional hero, the classical hero, is a highly placed character, better than we. So his fall should evoke pity and fear in the viewer, in the audience. So you remember all those formula. So Shakespeare modeled his tragedies after Aristotle's formula. So you could see the influences, Seneca, Aristotle. But Shakespeare did not really obey the three unities. Shakespeare did not obey the principles of the three unities because he made use of subplots. Because he made use of subplots. Made use of what? Subplots and comic relief. Shakespeare made use of subplots and comic relief. Shakespeare made use of subplots and comic relief. Shakespeare violated the principles of the three unities. Violated the principles of the three unities. What are the three unities? 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 Unities of what, and what? Unity of what, and what? So, you have to study your books to stay informed. Now, when a question is asked, you now go back and start looking at your notes. Okay. What is comic relief? Shakespeare violated the three unities as the unity of action, place, and time. What is comic relief? In which type of drama do we use comic relief? In which type of drama do we use comic relief? We use comic relief in tragedy, not comedy. What is comic relief? What is comic relief? Okay. Comic relief is used in tragedy to relieve tension. in the mind of the audience. It's a scene. It is a humorous scene in tragedy, meant to relieve tension. Because tragedy is full of sorrow, full of anxiety. So some scenes are created to relieve these anxieties or moody countenance from the characters. That's comic relief. Humorous scenes, funny scenes are created in tragedy to relieve tension. Then let us talk about revenge tragedy. In revenge tragedy, a wronged protagonist tries to seek revenge but destroys himself in the process. In revenge tragedy, a wronged protagonist tries to seek revenge but ruins himself in the process. A good example of revenge tragedy is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. A good example of revenge tragedy, I will ask you, which of these is a revenge tragedy? And I put options. Then we have villain tragedy. Villain tragedy. Villain tragedy. Villain tragedy. This is a type of tragedy in which the hero is a villain. In which the hero is a villain. Who is a villain? Can somebody define a villain? The villain is the evil character in a literary work. Good. So a villain tragedy is a type of tragedy in which the hero or the protagonist is a villain, a bad guy. Right? He's a bad guy. So the villain is a bad guy, right? Good. But don't write it in exam that the villain is a bad guy, right? Just say that the villain is the evil character in the literary work. But in your mind, you know that the villain is the bad guy. Okay, good. Then you have villain tragedy, Macbeth. A good example of villain tragedy is Macbeth. 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 By William Shakespeare. Macbeth by William Shakespeare. A good example of villain tragedy. Then you have heroic tragedy. Heroic tragedy. In heroic tragedy, the hero is larger than life. In heroic tragedy, the hero is larger than life. He challenges the limits of the human possibility. He challenges the limits of the human possibility. A good example is Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. Ever heard of Dr. Faustus? By Christopher Marlowe? Is the most popular play by Christopher Marlowe, Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus. A good example of heroic tragedy is Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. It has an eponymous hero. It has an eponymous hero who is an intellectual. He sells his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge and pleasure. Right? He sells his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge and pleasure. So you might want to read up on Dr. Faustus. There are copies in the market. Right? Then the mask. Cannot talk about Renaissance drama without talking about the mask. The mask. We talked about it when we were talking about types of drama. So the mask is an entertainment at court. Court. C-O-U-R-T. Court here means palace, the king's palace. An entertainment at court combining dance, songs, dialogue, and spectacle. Mask is an entertainment at court that combines dance, song, dialogue, and spectacle with extravagant display of costumes and scenery. With extravagant display of costumes and scenery. Extravagant display of costumes and scenery. Mask is an entertainment at court that combines dance, song, dialogue, and what? Spectacle. With what? With extravagant display of what? Costumes, bright costumes, and scenery. Scenery is spelled S-C-E-N-E-R-Y. Scenery. Scenery. That means the scenes are beautiful. Lavishly decorated scenes. Of course, you wouldn't expect anything less at the court. History plays. History plays. History plays. History plays depicted historical events. History plays depicted historical events. History plays depicted historical events. It's reflected on national issues, politics, and power play. It helps the reader to reflect on issues of national importance, reflect on politics and power play. History plays reflected history, important historical events in the life of a society or a nation. So Elizabethan drama thrived because of the advent of professional actors, the existence of a theater, and a theater-loving audience. These three factors contributed to the growth of Elizabethan drama. Let me mention again the three factors that contributed to the growth and development of Elizabethan drama was the existence of professional actors, people who dedicated themselves to acting and acting alone. And what again? The existence of a theater, a place where plays are staged or rehearsed and staged, and a theater-loving, theater-going audience. Those are the three things that were in place which encouraged the development of Elizabethan drama. Before now, that means in the medieval period, the miracle and the mystery plays were acted by amateurs. Were acted by who? Amateurs. Amateurs are not professional. Were acted by amateurs. In the medieval period, miracle and mystery plays were acted by amateurs. All right? It was later acted by clergymen, by the clergy, then pages in a lord's house. Pages in a lord's house. Pages. Today we call them PAs, personal assistants. Pages, a page. Personal assistant in a lord's house. I mean a nobleman's house. Okay? And semi-professionals. In the medieval period, plays were acted by amateurs. Later, they were acted by the clergy. Clergy, we mean like pastors. Okay? Later, by servants in a nobleman's house, pages in a lord's house, and then semi-professionals. Then semi-professional. Stand up. These actors were not respectable in status. These actors were not respectable in status. Not today when you see Nollywood actors, we run after them, we cheer them. Right? But these actors were not respectable at all. All right? In fact, they were considered as low lives. They were considered as what? Low lives. They were considered among low lives or people of dubious character. They were seen as people of dubious character. In 1545, these actors were classified as rogues and vagabonds and could be arrested. Were classified as what? Rogues and vagabonds and could be what? Arrested. And could be arrested. So this made actors to attach themselves to noblemen. This made actors to attach themselves to noblemen, and they wore the badges of these noblemen. That means I'm working for this nobleman, I'm working for this lord, right? But in the course of working for the person, I also act, so I cannot be arrested. So that was one way of helping the actors to avoid arrest. So they attach themselves to noblemen or are important members of society and wore their badges. Okay? So they were saved from prosecution. So that's why you have actors groups like the Lord Chamberlain's Men, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, the Lord Admiral's Men, because it will show that they are working for that particular Lord. The Lord Chamberlain's Men, Lord Chamberlain's Men, Lord Admiral's Men. Admiral's Men. So you come across such theater groups. The reason they attach themselves to the noblemen is to avoid arrest or prosecution because of the law that was passed in 1545 that pronounced most actors as rogues and vagabonds and subject to arrest. We also have the king's men. We also have the king's men. 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 Please take down these notes. Don't think that anything is not important. So, I have told you. You also have the king's men. When James came to the throne, with time, actors were accepted at the court. With time, actors were accepted at the court. By the court, I mean the king's palace. An example is the children of Paul's theater group. The first theater was built in 1576. The first theater was built in 1576 by James Burbage. By James Burbage. The first theater was built in 1576 by who? James Burbage. James Burbage. It was called the theater. It was built outside of London in a place called Shoreditch. 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 It was built outside of London in a place called Shoreditch. 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 Outside of London. A place called Shoreditch. Plays were acted at high speed. Plays were acted at high speed without the act and scene breaks that we know today. Plays were acted at high speed without the act and scene breaks that we know today. There was no scenery and there was only few props. But costumes were elaborate. The plays were performed in the afternoons. The plays were performed in the afternoons. The plays were performed in the afternoons. You could not perform a play in the evening because there was no electricity, and outside London, you couldn't really have the right lighting. So the plays were performed in the afternoon. Take note of this. Another theater called the Globe. Another theater called the Globe was built in 1608. In Elizabethan drama, boys played women's parts. Women were not allowed to act. Boys played women's parts. Boys played women's parts. Women were not allowed to act. So the parts of women were acted by who? Boys. And these boys were apprentices. They were learning how to act. Okay, so this is where we have to end our introduction to Renaissance drama and begin our discussion on Shakespeare's Othello in the time that we have remaining. So first of all, we have to look at William Shakespeare's background. Okay? We look at William Shakespeare's background. So in studying every text, that's the first thing we do. We examine the author's background. We try to look at who the author is. So William Shakespeare was born in 1564. William Shakespeare was born in 1564. So that makes him a Renaissance guy, Renaissance gentleman. He was born in the midst of the 16th century, 1664. And he lived until 1616. He died in 1616. William Shakespeare died in 1616. 1616. 1564. And that was in the 16th century. 1564 is 16th century. Now he died in 1616. He was born at a place called Stratford-upon-Devon. 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 Upon-Avon. Stratford-upon-Avon. Stratford-upon-Avon. Upon the Avon. Stratford-upon-the-Avon. Okay? Shakespeare is reputed to be the greatest dramatist that ever lived. Shakespeare is reputed to be the greatest dramatist that ever lived. Shakespeare is reputed to be the greatest dramatist that ever lived. Shakespeare is reputed to be the greatest dramatist that ever lived. William Shakespeare is reputed to be the greatest dramatist that ever lived. He wrote and performed not less than 39 plays. He wrote and performed not less than 39 plays, 39, including those he collaborated with other writers. Including those he collaborated with other writers. His plays have been translated into different languages. His plays are considered timeless and universal. William Shakespeare's plays are considered timeless and universal. And that explains why we still study them today. Timeless and universal. That means they stand the test of time and they can be enjoyed by all peoples around the world. Shakespeare's plays are considered timeless and universal. His plays cut across comedy, tragedy, tragicomedy, history plays, and problem plays. His plays cut across such subgenres as comedy, tragedy, tragicomedy, history plays, and problem plays. History plays and problem plays. History plays and problem plays. Examples of Shakespeare's comedies are Twelfth Night, The Taming of the Shrew, Twelfth Night, The Taming of the Shrew, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. You can take A Midsummer Night's Dream, you don't have to take all. A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Taming of the Shrew, Twelfth Night, The Two Gentlemen of Verona are all Shakespeare's comedies. Shakespeare's tragedies are Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello. Incidentally, we are going to study Othello this week and next week. And so you must have your physical Othello in class, or the one that you can see, whether it is soft copy. All right? So that we can read, because the nature of the question is that you must read the play cover to cover. And before you go for the national exams, you must have read the play 3 or 4 times. That's how to do it. There will be 10 questions based on Othello in the objective. It's really the last part. Check the last exam, you see. So to have those 10 questions, 10 over 10, you need to read the play at least 3 times before you go for the exam. So that you master all the parts. So that when they say, who made this statement, you know already. Who made the statement? Who was he talking to? You know already. You're not joking here. All right? There's no joke here. And if you play, you will miss those questions. All right? 3 times at least before you go for the exam. Okay? Cover to cover, back to back. All right. Anyway, don't be scared. The Lord is with you. All right. So we are going to study Othello as an example of Shakespeare's tragedy. And then Shakespeare's tragicomedies are The Merchants of Venice, Winter's Tale, The Merchants of Venice and Winter's Tale, and Cymbeline are all Shakespeare's tragicomedies. Winter's Tale, The Merchants of Venice, Cymbeline, Cymbeline, Cymbeline. Then Shakespeare's history plays, we already explained what history plays are. They are response to history. Richard III, King Henry IV, are all history plays. Richard III, Henry IV. Problem plays. Problem play deals with a particular social situation, society, a particular problem in society. Like Measure for Measure is a problem play. All's Well That Ends Well is a problem play by William Shakespeare. Troilus and Cressida is a problem play. Shakespeare is also known for his sonnets. That is why we have what we call Shakespearean sonnets, named after him. The English sonnet is also named after Shakespeare. That's why it is also called Shakespearean sonnet. The English sonnet is named after William Shakespeare, which is why the English sonnet is also called Shakespearean sonnets. It can also be called Elizabethan sonnet because Elizabeth ruled while these sonnets were being written. Shakespeare surpassed all the other sonnet writers, all the other sonneters, by writing 154 sonnets. Okay. Let us look at the cast of William Shakespeare's Othello. That might bring the class to an end. So that when we come next time, we look at the story and then we proceed with the reading. The cast of William Shakespeare's Othello. We have Othello, known as the Moor. We have Othello himself, the Moor. He's a brave soldier in the service of the Venetian state, where he's a minority in a white society. Okay? So Moor is a word that relates to Africa or to persons of the East and probably of another religion. Okay, but it definitely relates to Africa. Meaning that is a black in a white society. So that's why it's called the Moor. Then we have Brabantio. Brabantio is the senator of Venice. Senator of Venice. Senator of Venice. He is the father of Desdemona. He's the father of Desdemona. Othello is the husband of Desdemona. All right? Then we have Gratiano. 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 That's Brabantio's brother and Desdemona's uncle. Brabantio's brother, meaning that he is Desdemona's uncle. Desdemona's uncle. Then we have Lodovico. 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 Lodovico is Desdemona's cousin. Desdemona's cousin. Desdemona's cousin. Desdemona's cousin. Then you have Duke. That's the Duke of Venice. You have Duke of Venice. You have Duke of Venice. Duke of Venice. That's like the governor of Venice. Okay? Then we have senators of Venice. Senators of Venice. Remember that they valued male characters over female characters. So they first of all mention all the male characters before they now mention the women. Then you have Cassio. Cassio. Cassio, Othello's lieutenant. Othello's lieutenant. Chosen in place of Iago, which makes him jealous of Cassio and Othello. Then we have Iago. Iago is Othello's ancient, junior officer. Iago. Iago, not Lago. Iago. Othello's ancient. Othello's ancient, a junior officer. Ancient means a junior officer. That means lower than lieutenant. All right, it's a position that Iago wanted, but Othello gives it to Cassio. So it makes Iago angry and begins to plot Othello's fall. All right? Then we have Roderigo. 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 He's a Venetian gentleman. Venetian gentleman. He's in love with Desdemona, but the father has told him, you cannot marry my daughter. And so when Othello marries Desdemona, he gets angry and joins Iago to plot how to get back at Othello and then get back Desdemona to be his wife. Then we have Montano. 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 He's the governor of Cyprus before Othello got there. He's the governor of Cyprus. He's Othello's predecessor in Cyprus, in the governance of Cyprus. The governor of Cyprus before Othello got there. So he's Othello's predecessor. Then we have sailors. Sailors. We have sailors. We have clown. We have clown. Clown. A character that makes people laugh in drama. We have herald. Herald is a type character, is a messenger. We have herald. Herald, like we had herald in Lysistrata. That's why I have herald in Othello. Okay. Then we have Desdemona. Desdemona is Brabantio's daughter, Othello's wife. Desdemona. We have Desdemona, Othello's wife. Othello's wife. And Brabantio's daughter. Then we have Bianca. 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 Bianca is a courtesan. It's a courtesan. A courtesan. Courtesan. Kind of what you would call a call girl. All right? And it's Cassio's mistress. Cassio's mistress. Cassio's mistress. Bianca is Cassio's mistress, a courtesan. Cassio's mistress. Then we have officers, gentlemen, messenger, musician, attendants. Officers, gentlemen, messenger, musicians, attendants. I'll tell that again. Officers, gentlemen, messenger, musician, attendants. And that is where we bring our class to a close for today. When we meet tomorrow, we'll go into the synopsis of the play and then we'll start reading. So bring a copy of Othello to class, whether soft or hard, bring to class. Everybody will read, right? And then we go line by line and do the interpretation. Have a blessed day.